Good morning, children. Today we start with the study of continents. And in this theme, the first continent we are going to learn about is the geography of Africa. Here, it is important to remember that geography is more than the location of cities and important landforms. Geography is about how humans interact with the land in which they live. We understand about the landforms of a region and how these landforms shape the decisions, culture, and economy of the people living there. Africa is the second largest continent in the world with 54 recognized countries. Africa is the richest continent in the world in terms of natural resources, animals, and plant life. It is a land of variety and is home to some of the earliest civilizations like the Egyptian civilization. It has the world's largest desert, that is the Sahara, and the world's longest river, Nile, 6671 kilometers long, that is 6671 kilometers long. It is a continent which is south of Europe between the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. And 400 kilometers off the coast, that is this area of East Africa, we find the Madagascar island. It is the world's second largest island country. And we all know which is the first one. I hope we can write the answers right now. And then it is separated by the Mozambique Channel, the water body in between. Now, before we start with the introduction, we need to learn about a few important facts about this huge continent. Africa was initially referred to as the dark continent, the hottest continent, a plateau continent, and the last explored continent. Now, all these various names were given to this continent for a reason. Africa is referred to as the dark continent because it remained unexplored for a very long time. In the late 19th century, it was explored by some of the explorers, namely David Livingstone, Mungo Park, and Henry Morton Stanley. Very little information was available to the world, so it had many dark or the hidden secrets. Thus, the name Dark Continent was given to Africa. The second name was the hottest continent. That is, it is actually very hot. Why? Because the equator passes through the middle of the continent and most of the Africa lies within the tropics. We'll just be discussing the important lines of latitudes, then you can understand this better. It is therefore the hottest continent with three major deserts in Africa. That is the Sahara, which is the world's largest desert. The second one being the Namib and the Kalahari Desert. Just to revise, what is a desert? A desert is a region which receives very little rainfall. That is, a common desert definition which is used is an area that gets less than 10 inches of rain per year. The third name given to it was the Plateau continent. Now, most of Africa consists of the undulating plateaus. Now, the meaning of the word undulating is it has the smoothly rising and falling form or outline. You must have seen the waves also. They just form a smooth rise and a fall, exactly in the same manner as you can see in the picture, which rise steeply from the coast. So it was very difficult for any of the explorers to move inside or move to the interiors of Africa from the coastal areas, and the coastal areas did not have any harbors, and in fact very few harbors were there, so the ships also could not be anchored over there. The next name which was given was the last explored continent. As I told you, in the early 19th century, it was being discovered, or in fact being explored by those names which I took, David Livingstone Stone and Mungo Park and Henry Morton Stanley. They traced the course of the rivers and discovered the Victoria Falls. So, here, when we are talking about the name given, that is the last explored. Now, why was it explored so late? It was called so because of the difficulties faced by the people who tried to explore it. So, nobody was very willingly going into the continent to explore it because of the hard conditions or very hardships. A lot of hardships had to be faced to actually move into the terrain of Africa. Number one being in the north, the Sahara Desert was impenetrable. That means nobody could pass through it due to the severe heat and the dry conditions. We've just discussed what is a desert. That is, there is no rainfall or less than 10 centimeters of rainfall. The second one is the curvy plateaus along the coast, which were very, very difficult to pass. We just discussed about the plateaus. The third point being the rivers of Africa, which had many rapids. That means the river, you can see it in this picture, the up and down movement along the rocky surface, those cause the rapids. It's a turbulent part of the course of a river, and it's not at all easy to cross through it, and it is not navigable. Secondly, the waterfalls. Innumerable waterfalls are there as the waters continue to, um, the rivers are moving, and when they reach a steep incline, they fall from that. That falling of the river is called the waterfall. And it is not possible to cross the waterfalls very, very easily. The next reason why it was explored so late is the dense and the extensive equatorial forest. The word dense means very, very thick, and extensive means very huge. So, these are the two typical words used for the equatorial forest of Africa: extremely thick and massively huge. So, these equatorial forests had hot and humid climate. As the name suggests, the equatorial forest. Now, these forests are along the line of equator. That is, the equator passes through the middle of the continent, so it receives the direct rays of the sun throughout the year. Hence, most of Africa has a hot climate throughout the year. And here, when you have constant rainfall and constant sun supply, automatically you have a very thick growth of forest, and these forests are very hot, humid, and in these forests you have extremely wild and poisonous insects and animals which are there. One of the insects which is mentioned is the tsetse fly, that which causes the yellow fever. All of these were such horrifying conditions that nobody wanted to explore Africa. Specifically, moving into the interiors of Africa was very difficult.